Thanks, you too. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this webinar introducing the LOCOMOTION project. My name is Khalid Diab and I work at the European Environmental Bureau in the comms there, and I'm also a journalist. But before we begin, I'll show you a brief video about the project and also to give people a chance to sign in. So if you'll bear with me, I'll share my screen with you. Okay, hang on 1 second. I'm going to share my screen with you. Share screen, here we go. Okay, so I'll show you our video to introduce briefly the project while we wait for other people to join us.
LOCOMOTION aims to be a tool to support European climate and energy policies.
A new multi-regional integrated assessment model to provide policymakers and stakeholders with a practical modeling system to assess different sustainability policy options.
From this model, different easy-to-use interfaces will be developed, adapted to different profiles of potential users, such as policymakers or civil society.
LOCOMOTION can empower civil society to get involved in a public debate.
LOCOMOTION's models and tools can help policymakers identify the best pathway towards sustainability and social justice.
Okay, great. So that's our video introducing the project. So hopefully more of you have joined us now. So I'll just stop sharing for a moment. So yeah, so we've got a decent number of people with us now. So basically, so first maybe I'll introduce my co-panelists from the project, or I let them introduce themselves briefly. So we can start with Margarita Mediavilla. Can you introduce yourself to everyone, please?
Hello, I am Margarita Mediavilla, and I'm part of the project of the group of Energy, Economy and System Dynamics of the University of Valladolid, who is the group that is the leader of the project, is the coordinator of the project.
And Robert Oakes, could you introduce yourself, please, Rob?
Good morning, everyone. So my name's Robert Oakes, and I work at the United Nations University Institute for Environment and Human Security. And our role in the project is mainly connected to society and demography, which I'll talk about soon. Thank you.
Great, thanks a lot. And Kati Weser, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, good morning, everyone. I'm Kati, and I work with Khalid for the European Environmental Bureau, which is a big environmental umbrella organization based in Brussels. And as EB, we are mostly engaged in the communication work package of LOCOMOTION and also in the stakeholder involvement, which I will talk a little bit about later.
And finally, Ivan Ramos Diaz, can you introduce yourself? Or have we lost him? It appears we've lost one of our panelists, but hopefully he'll join us again soon. Okay, I don't see him. So anyway, so yeah, so hopefully his connection became disconnected. He was with us earlier. So yeah, and as I said earlier, my name is Khalid Diab. I work also at the European Environmental Bureau in the communications department. So just a few notes about Zoom webinars. I'm sure a lot of you have already taken part in them, so you're familiar with them. So basically at the bottom of your screen, you'll see some tools. There's a Q&A and a chat box. The chat box enables you to make comments or remarks or to engage with other participants. You can either send a message to everyone or to individuals involved in the webinar, as Fons Janssen has done. And then there's a Q&A section where you can pose your questions to us. Okay, these questions, we won't deal with them until we finished our presentations. But do please, whenever a question occurs to you, just type it into the Q&A. Once we've finished our presentation, we'll look at the Q&A. We may invite you to pose your question directly and unmute you. Then after we've answered the questions, we could have a more open debate. But then if you want to engage in that, you need to raise your hand. The way you do that is if you click on participants, you'll find a box opens to the side, like a panel opens to the side, and there you have some tools, including raise hand. And Ivan has joined us. Ivan, would you like to introduce yourself briefly before I begin the presentation? Ivan, can you hear us? Okay. Anyway, Ivan is from our partner Cartif, and he'll be talking later about stakeholder participation and so on, tools for stakeholders. Okay, Fons Janssen has a question here already. Raise hand and Q&A, but your explanation is clear. Okay, all right, great. Okay, now I'll share my screen again so you can see our presentation. Okay, just 1 second. Share screen. Okay. Oh, okay. So the first thing we'll look at is, what is a model? Of course, we're not talking about this kind of model. We're talking about different kinds of model. So what is a model? So of course, for those of you who are in the know, you'll be aware of this. So bear with us for a moment while we just explain briefly for those who are not so aware of what modeling is and what a model is. A model is basically a scaled down representation or approximation of reality. And you have different kinds of models. You can have physical models, which represent something physical, like a scaled down model, say, of a house or something. Mathematical models, which use equations.
Khalid, yes. Really sorry to interrupt you, but we're not seeing your screen. I think.
Oh, really? You're not seeing my screen? Okay.
Nope. Thought it was better at slide 1 than at slide 20.
Okay, hang on, I'll go back and try and share it again. My apologies to everyone. I thought I shared it. Ah, yes, I see. Okay, now can you see?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yes.
So, thank you, Alicia. So a model is basically a scaled down representation or approximation of reality, and there are different types, like you said, physical models, mathematical models. Okay, hang on. So you see my full screen, right?
Yes, we do.
Okay, conceptual models, climate and environmental models, which have become quite a lot in the public eye now with the climate crisis and attempts to understand it and and come up with simulations and solutions for it. And economic and social models, which model the economy and the different factors about society and so on. Okay, so here we're going to talk about world in crisis, which is really the rationale behind our project and behind the LOCOMOTION, because the world at the moment stands at a historic turning point, with rapid changes in the environment around us. So one aspect of this historic turn point, this crisis we're facing, or this multi-dimensional crises that we're facing, is that the climate is reaching boiling point. Global warming has already increased the temperature significantly above pre-industrial levels, and this process looks set to continue and even to accelerate and possibly reach tipping points as well. Then we have another crisis, which is often referred to as a biodiversity crisis, where species are dying out at a scale unseen in millions of years. Some are calling it the sixth mass extinction. Then as our ecosystems are stretched or collapsing, and this is often due to habitat destruction, and just like, for example, the recent model that found that now man-made material outweighs biomass and so on. So it gives you some idea of the scale at which we're destroying and replacing nature. Our finite resources are being overexploited. You know, there's all the talk that we've had for the last few decades about peak oil and so on. And it's peak everything really, if you think about it. Like we're overusing most of the minerals and resources that the world carries. And our economy is in crisis. There's the immediate crisis caused by the pandemic, but there's also a crisis of relating to the model we use. You know, how much further can we continue along this path of continuous expansion within the limits of a finite, biophysical system, a finite world. And all these crises together, one major defining factor for this crisis that stands at the center of them is humanity. We're either the cause or a major factor in each of these different crises. So models are, if you want to look at it poetically, you can look at them as kind of scientific crystal balls. Of course, the scientists among us will say they're not crystal balls because we're not really predicting the future. We're just modeling different scenarios and so on. But of course, it does give us insight into what possible futures there are. So models can help us understand how the world is changing. So we can not just model the present, we can also model the past and the future based on certain assumptions. So basically, of course, we're not predicting the future. We're modeling it in the sense that if certain conditions prevail, then the future will likely look like this. And to project the future consequences of current actions. So we have these scenarios basically can help us, look at the future consequences of the actions we're taking today, and also the future consequences of alternatives to the current reality. So that means you can forecast or get an idea of the likely outcomes and consequences of change. And we can compare different future scenarios. So we can use models to look at the consequences of the current situation and other alternatives, and compare and contrast how each one of these will impact on the future. So to look more specifically at LOCOMOTION, LOCOMOTION is a project which is it's funded by the EU, and it involves partners across Europe. And it's basically working to develop a set of sophisticated models and tools to assess the socio-economic and environmental impact of different policy options, whether it's business as usual policy option or more radical changes. And the overarching objective or aim of this is to help society, and by society we mean obviously policymakers and civil society and other stakeholders, to make informed decisions about the transition to a more sustainable, low carbon future or climate neutral future. Locomotion's models will assess numerous factors and scenarios and storylines, if you like, but these will include things like the European Green Deal, the transition or the objective to reach climate neutrality by 2050. And this is a new introduction, following the outbreak of COVID-19. We're also exploring the effects of pandemics and much more. So we're going to, the main models, integrated assessment model is what we call it. It's called WILIAM, which is short for Within Limits Integrated Assessment Model. An integrated assessment model is basically a model that brings together numerous individual models or modules that integrate together to reflect a complex, multifaceted reality. And the models relate to a number of areas. So there's economy and finance, there's renewable and non-renewable energy, there's raw materials, there's energy infrastructure and technologies, there's environment, and there's climate change. These are the different components of the integrated assessment model. And one sort of unique aspect of WILIAM or of Locomotion as a whole is that the project takes account of the biophysical limits of the world. Some other models, a lot of other models, they don't have these limitations built into them. So that's kind of problematic because, of course, the world is finite. And also, the models take account of the feedback effects, how, for example, the environment affects the economy and energy and so on, and vice versa, how our economic systems and infrastructures and technologies impact the environment. Sorry, Robert. And there's also population and society. I forgot the last bullet point there. So WILIAM is developing a number of different overarching or main storylines. One is the business as usual one, in which we continue to depend largely on fossil fuels and continue to follow the path of maximizing economic growth and so on and so forth. Then there's green growth storyline. And green growth, for those who are unfamiliar with it, it tries to continue on the path of economic growth, but by reducing the environmental impact of that growth, or trying to even eliminate the environmental impact of that growth. So it means to sort of like decouple or to detach economic growth from raw material use. So basically, we would have economic growth without additional, say, emissions, or without using more minerals and so on. So that's the idea behind green growth. And WILIAM will assess, what the environmental and socio-economic impacts of green growth would be. The Green New Deal, or the European Green Deal as well. The Green New Deal is the idea, being pursued in America or proposed in America, and the European Green Deal is the one actually being pursued in Europe now. And degrowth or post-growth, or it goes by numerous names, which is the voluntary. As opposed to, at the moment, the economy is in Europe, for example, and a lot across the world has shrunk, but that's involuntary. That's a crisis. That's because of the pandemic. Degrowth proposes the the voluntary downscaling of the economy. That doesn't mean necessarily that all sectors will shrink or all economies around the world will shrink. They will be prioritized. So essential, important sectors to human well-being may grow, but polluting sectors and sectors that are not so important to our welfare and well-being will be shrunk or eliminated and so on. So we would look at the impact of the growth scenario. So now I will ask Robert Oakes to introduce the economy and finance and population and society models. Over to you, Robert.
Thank you very much. Yeah, as Khaled mentioned, throughout the locomotion and the WILIAM model, the idea is to really lend a bit more detail to what's been done before in integrated assessment models. And a large part of this is the economy and finance module. So as it says at the top, the economy and finance models represent the intricate and intimate relationships between the economy and ecology, but I would also say, therefore, also to society. So in a minute, I'll talk about the society and demography, but we're really keen to connect the environment, society, and the economy. So in terms of upgrading past models, particularly the Medeiros model that some partners have worked in, there's a bit more emphasis on giving detail and rigor to household and government consumption. And in terms of how governments are consuming or investing, there's a bit more emphasis on relating this to climate change. So climate change adaptation and mitigation, how that is impacted and the feedbacks from these expenditures. And then on the household level, I think this is quite a big jump that we're making. We're able to put a bit more data in terms of the type of household. So we're disaggregating the households by the size of the household, by the composition in terms of skills. So we have this kind of heterogeneity, differentiated households, which makes the model more accurate. And that means that any change in consumption can filter through to the model and give a better result. Briefly, in terms of corporate and industry production, there's a lot more data going in about dividing up sectors to look at how industries operate through the transitions to sustainability. So we're really able to look at individual industries and how they might be affected by policy and how they might affect policy and transitions. Looking at labor dynamics. So again, we go back to the kind of skills in the household, and we're able to model what employment, what unemployment means, and how this relates to the economy, and how that, of course, relates to society and the environment also. And of course, this would connect to the demography and society module when we think about migration flows as well. International trade, this is another focus of the economy and finance models. We're looking at how decarbonisation works across society, the trading of carbon, for example. And also we look at, in order to consider how trade is between states and regions, we consider a gravity model where we can think about distance between states, GDP and prices, but also we can consider cultural reasons why trade exists and will continue to exist. So common languages or even colonial ties. So this is quite a nice way of considering trade. And then finally, and very importantly, to consider the economic impact of climate change. So both mitigation and adaptation will be considered. And we're having some meetings about this at the moment to really kind of finalize how we're looking at this. But the idea is to really consider the damages that climate change can cause and how these can be avoided through climate change adaptation, and the impacts of mitigation policies also. Slide, please. Okay, and then moving on to the population and society models. So I think, as is sometimes clear, maybe from the past slide, sometimes we discount society. We don't really think how within a model that humanity exists within this idea, and within the LOCOMOTION project and within the WILIAM model, we're really keen to really put people and society front and center. So within this module, we're really trying to look at the connections between demography, society, and sustainable transitions. And in this sense, we're trying to humanize both the modeling process and the content. So the way that we do the process, we're trying to get stakeholders involved to try and get their understanding of these interconnections. And that means that we're able to really put society quite central. And if you look at this nice little diagram, this is a representation of the Sustainable Development Goals, and it shows that society is very central, and the links between the economy at the top and the environment at the bottom, you can't really separate them. So I think we're really arguing that within our integrated model, we really have to have a strong focus on society. So within this, we have two separate modules. In terms of demography, we're really trying to increase the accuracy of modeling of population. So that's done through getting better endogenous data. We're modeling population growth internally within the module. And that's in terms of age cohorts, but also gender as well, because gender is quite important, because the way that men, women, children use resources and are affected by transitions and climate change tends to be different. So this gives us a more accurate representation of demographic processes, and this, of course, filters into the rest of the models through these feedbacks and gives a more robust model more generally. Then in terms of society, through our review and through consultations with stakeholders, we came up with a few areas within society to focus on. We're looking at health, inequality, migration, and well-being. So some of these will map on directly to some of the Sustainable Development Goals, which are the way through which global society is trying to develop in a sustainable manner. And we found that these areas are kind of under-addressed through existing models, but also very relevant to be able to develop sustainably in terms of society. So yeah, at the moment we're quite happy with how the demography is looking, but we're still developing the society, and the idea is to really understand in terms of health the impacts of disease, the impacts of food security, water security. In terms of inequality, we'll also be able to relate this to well-being and see how income can relate to how people are able to respond to the challenges of transition, particularly how this relates to climate change mitigation. And in terms of migration, we're considering how climate change, for example, can relate to pressures on the environment and can contribute to flows of people. I think I'll wrap up there. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Robert. Yeah, and that's really important, because a lot of people, when they think about the economy or modeling or something, they think of it as, you know, something abstract, something unrelated to everyday life, you know, that the economy is somehow separate from you know, society or the environment. But it's great that this sort of like measures and quantifies the human impact like that, especially, you know, since we're all, you know, issues of inequality and adaptation are stuff that is on many people's minds, especially during this pandemic. So we'll move on to the environmental and energy and raw material models, and Margherita Mediavia will present those for us. Over to you, Margherita.
Oh, hi. Hello, thanks for the presentation. Well, the environmental module or the environmental models are a very important part of the WILIAM model. And one specific feature of this model is that we want to address the two-way relationship between human activity and the environment. So we not only measure how the humankind is increasing its pressure on land on food, on water, and on energy resources, which is something that we do, no? Because we have very important impacts of the human economy and the human activities on the planet that we all know, such as the 6 mass extinctions that Khaled has mentioned before. But we want to address also the other way relationship, how this damages to the environment, how this climate change and how this lack of resources may impact the human activities and may impact the economy and may impact the societies and the well-being of the persons, of the people. So that's why this environmental model is an important part of the model. We are going to address the competition for land for different demands, such as food, such as feed for animals, such as energy, because renewable energies need territory, they need land, they need space. And also the competition with nature, because the ecosystems need space also in order for them to be healthy and to be able to perform all their ecosystem activities and their ecosystem systems that are also very important for our life. We will pay an important attention to food production and to diet, to the policies that change diet, because we see that those are some of the most important policies, the ones that can make a bigger change. Water is also an important aspect of the ecological crisis. So we will model water supply and the demand of water and the allocation between uses. And of course, all this environmental model is based on the concept of planetary boundaries, the fact that the Earth is limited and that the human activities cannot damage this capacity of the Earth to feed our activities without reaching tipping points which are harmful for all of us. So this is one of the critical points, the concept of planetary boundaries and the tipping points that may arise mainly because of climate change. Okay. And another important part of these physical limits to the soil society and the economic growth is the energy resources and the raw materials. So locomotion is based on modeling the energy transition, and this energy transition has an impact on the availability of raw materials, especially critical minerals, which are very important for the renewable energies, and also the impacts of this energy transition on the society and on the environment. No? So we will plan different scenarios for the transition to renewable energy technologies, and these scenarios will have an impact on all the different aspects. They will have an impact on the demand of raw materials, demand of fossil fuels, demand of minerals, and also the demands on the natural world, demand of bioenergy, for example. And also we will study the links with the economy, no? Because the energy transition is investments, and the lack of energy transition also has an effect on the economy that may not have enough energy supply to feed its activities. Well, this is mainly the overview of the modeling that we want to make, no? Relating the energy transition with all these aspects that come from the natural world and that come from the resources.
Great, thanks so much, Margie. Yeah, this is like a fascinating aspect of the project, because it also sometimes runs counterintuitively to what we all sort of expect. You know, you think, okay, you know, problem, climate change, global warming, solution, renewable energy, and so on. But it's not that simple and straightforward, because of course, you know, even if emissions are lower, they may not necessarily be lower during a transition, or there could be other forms of environmental destruction associated with it, like mining, for example. You know, okay, renewable energy is free and it's abundant, and hence we call it renewable. But the technology required to capture that energy and make it useful to humanity, that comes with an environmental price tag as well, of course. So, you know, that could also, doesn't mean that we can have limitless, once we transition, that, you know, it's the end of story. How we transition is also very important. So it's not to, you know, perpetuate the problems we face now, or create new problems. So, for example, you know, there's some interesting early results from this, from the Medius, the predecessor to this project, and the Locomotion. For example, on the limits of electric vehicles, because of all the material required to build the batteries and so on. You know, so yeah, so it's quite a fascinating dimension. So we'll move on to the next presentation on the tools for stakeholders. I'll invite Ivan Ramos to take the floor. Ivan, are you with us?
Yes, okay. Thank you, Khaled. Thanks for your introduction.
My pleasure.
In this part, I take an overview of the Locomotion tools. Locomotion will develop a set of tools tailored to different stakeholder groups to provide an easy access to the models and their information. These tools will support users in decision-making processes, improve knowledge sharing across the modeling community, and create climate awareness. These are an important part of the project to share our results with stakeholders and citizens in general. With our tools, the users have the opportunity to develop suitable pathways to develop a more suitable society in the future. And this is an important part to create awareness about climate and how to develop a better world. Next slide, please. Locomotion will develop 3 tools, and these tools are tailored to different groups. One tool is the model analyzer, the second is the model explorer, and the third tool is the global sustainability crossroad tool. The model analyzer is the first tool, is foreseen as a modern standalone application with an easy to use interface tailored to policymakers and their advisors. With this tool, they have the opportunity to parametricize the models to find the most suitable pathways to improve decision-making processes. The tool have a complete parameterization of the models and a complete access to the model developed in the Benzim software. The second tool is the model explorer, who is tailored to a wider audience, and it will be a web-based tool with an user-friendly and easy-to-use web interface. This tool will provide access to citizens for WILIAM models, and they will find accurate information about the parameterization, the variables, and how to develop these pathways with sliders or similar interfaces. And thanks to this interface, they find a clear explanation of how they find these pathways using a limited degrees of freedom in the variable management. And finally, the third tool is the global sustainability crossroad tool. This tool is a simulation game that take the players the opportunity to explore the different scenarios. It's built as an educational set of resources in which a moderator plays an important role. The tool will use the WILIAM set of models, and the players will find the most suitable scenario and obtain a mark at the end to compare with the rest of the participants in the simulations. And now we are working in the definition of the concept of the tools. And when we have the first release of these three tools, we need the stakeholder advice to improve these tools to have the opportunity to are easy to use and I don't know what more say. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Yes, as Ivan's presentation shows, that we want Locomotion is really centered around stakeholders as much as possible. We want to make our models and results as useful and user-friendly as possible for like stakeholders, whether they be civil society or policymakers, or even like businesses and the private sector and so on. So yeah, so these tools and games, I mean, for that, and also for education purposes, to raise awareness among, say, school children or university students about the modeling and the results of locomotion and so on. But also, it's not just the tools we're providing. We also didn't want sort of an ivory tower approach to the project, where sort of like academics, decide everything. So we try to involve stakeholders in the process itself, and my colleague Kati will speak on that.
Yes, thank you, Khaled. Yes, I mean, as also been mentioned before, stakeholder involvement is an important part of our project. So therefore, we created a project stakeholder board, or a pool, which is kind of an advisory body to our project consortium. And this really aims to ensure that our project results meet the needs of the project stakeholders groups. And Khaled just mentioned this policy and decision makers, civil society, which can also include, of course, educators, for example, in schools, and then also the private sector and businesses. And this pool that we have right now consists of representatives of those stakeholders groups with different expertise, as then also potential user groups of our WILIAM model in the project. And as also mentioned before, this pool or the stakeholder involvement serves also the purpose of that we ensure that the quality of the project outcomes is actually relevant for our stakeholders, and also meet the stakeholder needs in the design and development of the results. So essentially the idea is that the civil society and policymakers and other private or other relevant stakeholders contribute their knowledge, experience, and their opinions, and to involve these stakeholders in the conception, in use, and evaluation of the project results. So so the goal is to ensure collaboration and cooperation with other initiatives that maybe relate to climate change, or to support EU climate policy, to break down the scientific results into outputs that are useful. Yes, as Khaled mentioned, to also leave our ivory tower in a way, but also to increase the visibility and hence to be able to maximize the impact of our project outcomes. And we have different forms of engagement, so that can be bilateral meetings, surveys, focus group, etc. And unfortunately, right now due to COVID, they are mostly online. But we really hope that maybe towards the end of the year, we can actually also host some in-person meetings again. And for everyone that's interested, you can actually still join. So please, can also write my email again. If you feel like you have expertise or you can contribute to the project, feel free to send me an email. And if you're part of that pool, you will, amongst others, co-involve civil society and policymakers, as I said before, in the conception, use, and evaluation of the project. Yeah, break down these results into outputs. Sorry, I mentioned that before actually. Yeah, but it's a very easy process to be part of the pool, and if you feel like yeah, your expertise might be needed, or if you scan for a certain engagement that we foresee, we will then also contact you before, and yeah, only if you are willing to participate, you will be asked. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Kati. Yes, yes, stakeholder involvement, of course, is very important to make the project's results as useful as possible to the different stakeholders. So your involvement is great. So if you're interested, do get in touch with Kati. And yeah, and of course, it doesn't carry any heavy obligations. Like you may be invited to take part in certain activities. And if you're too busy to take part in those activities, you are allowed to say no. It's not, you're not signing up in blood or anything like that. It's a voluntary process. So yeah, please do get in touch if you do want to be involved more closely. Also, as this is an ongoing project, which will last at least another couple of years, you know, you can keep abreast of our activities and results and so on by bookmarking our website, following us on social media, or subscribing to our newsletter. So I'll share the different addresses. So for our website, it's locomotion-h2020.eu. For our newsletter, if you scroll down the homepage, a pop-up box will appear where you can subscribe, or you can go directly to the sign-up page, which is here. So it's a website, locomotion-h2020.eu/news-events/newsletters. On Twitter, we're at locomotion-h2020. On Facebook, it's a similar address. Our Facebook page is at locomotion.h2020. Of course, on Twitter, the H is capped up, but on Facebook, it's capped down to keep things interesting. And on LinkedIn, you can follow this link, or I suppose if you go to the search box on LinkedIn and type in locomotion-h2020, you should be able to find us quite easily. Yeah, I'm not actually sure how many locomotions there are on LinkedIn, but I guess there might be some others, but we're the Locomotion H2020. So I'll leave that up for another few seconds before I stop sharing my screen. Okay, great. So that was our presentation. Before we start the Q&A, we'd like to get some idea of who's attending. So I'm going to run this poll briefly, asking you, which sort of like stakeholder group you belong to, basically. So I'm launching the poll now. So if you could just take a few seconds to answer what best describes your work, whether it's policymaking, civil society, academia, media, or other. So we'll wait a little while to see. There's something like almost 50 people attending, so we'll wait a bit to give you all a chance to answer. Okay, so at the moment it looks like we have quite a lot of academics, followed by civil society. So I hope for the academics, it was interesting. It would be interesting to see what kind of academics as well, whether they're modelers or in related fields. So we have civil societies next with 35%. So wait, I'll end polling. I guess we've got it more or less most people. Okay, I'll end polling. And yeah, so I'll share the results with you for a second. So as you can see, we've got academia with 44%, civil society 35%, policymakers disappointing at only 6%, and other at 15%. Okay, so thank you for taking the time to do that. We have a second poll, which I'll share. Oh, I don't see it. Oh, wait, here we go. We have a second brief poll about locomotions, models, and tools based on the presentation. You know, we want you to express your opinion about how useful you find what we're working on, the models and the tools we're developing. So I'll give you 30 seconds or something to answer. Okay. So I'll give a few more seconds for people who haven't answered yet to express their view. Okay. It looks like not everyone has answered, but I suppose it could be an indication that not everyone wants to express a view, or maybe some people don't have an opinion. So I'll stop it there. So if I share results with you, so 30% think it's very useful and 23% think it's quite useful. That's more than half together. That's good. Nice to know. 40% think it's somewhat useful. Luckily, only 7%, so luckily for us, think it's unuseful, so somewhat unuseful, and 0% think it's unuseful or very unuseful. So that's reassuring to know that we're on a path that most of the participants seem to approve of. Okay, so I'll stop sharing the results. Now we'll deal with your questions. So I'll look at the Q&A briefly. I haven't had a chance to look at it yet. So, okay, so we've got a couple of questions, 3 questions, in fact, from Fons Janssen. So maybe I'll invite you, Fons, to pose your questions directly to the panel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yes, go ahead.
So let's make the questions very brief. So based on the presentation, for me, it's not fully clear what's the regional geographical scope of the model. I saw like pictures like that look like national outcomes, and some are global. Could you maybe elaborate on that?
Okay. All right. So that's and I see about you're also talking about the parameters we use, I guess.
Yeah, the second question is about, you sketched 4 scenarios. Normally when I see models, that also based on those 4 scenarios, you vary like 2 or 3 major parameters. So I was wondering whether these scenarios are like also connected to each other based on some parameters. And the third one is also about are carbon negative strategies like integrated? I'm active in the drawdown movement worldwide, which has a lot of researchers and also entrepreneurs that have carbon negative strategies with reforestation, rock weathering, seaweed farming. I was wondering whether these options are also taken into account. So economic activities that are still like in its infancy, but have potential large effect.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm not a modeler, so I'll leave it to my colleagues if any of them have answers to these questions.
Yeah, well, maybe I can answer the first question about regions. Locomotion is going to have a regional disaggregation. So there will be models for 9 big political regions, such as European Union, which is one of the regions, Latin America and the Caribbean, or North America and Mexico. Well, we will have these 9 basic big regions, which are basically economic regions. And then it will have a disaggregation at the European level as well. So it will be quite useful to make policies for Europe, because it will take into account the interactions between Europe and the rest of the big regions of the planet. And of course, there will be also some disaggregation at the European level for some of the parts of the model. And I don't know if I understood you when you talk about the 2-3 major parameters. Well, our scenarios change many parameters and many policies. It's not only 2-3 policies, the ones that we are taking into account. We take into account maybe hundreds of policies or tens of policies. And in order for these changes in the policies not to become a mess, we group them into scenarios. So in some scenarios, we have certain policies that go in one direction, and in other scenarios, most of the policies go in another direction. And the narrative of the scenarios is the one that gives a sense to this organization of the policies. And for the third question about the policies, I didn't understand very well all the policies. You talked about afforestation, for example, or reforestation, no? This is one of the policies that we are going to take into account in the land module, yes, for sure. And which ones else? What else?
Yeah, the drawdown model has at least 100 technical but also social policies regarding like really removing atmospheric carbon, because within their model they not only go for carbon neutrality but also for like negative carbon emissions, really to reverse climate change in that regards. So yeah, these are like 100 or 100 even more optional solutions.
And which model did you talk about? Sorry.
It's the drawdown model.
Okay. Yes. Well, of course, so this is a very important question that you addressed. The fact that we have to not only to stop emissions but also to try to incorporate carbon. In that sense, we have several options. We have in the energy module, we are going to consider the negative emission technologies like carbon capture and storage. And also in the land module, we want to set policies of carbon storage in soils or in vegetation as much as possible. But one of the things that we want to make in this model, and it's one thing that we did in previous models, is to be realistic with the policies and try to study in detail all the technical aspects of those policies in order to avoid policies which are very nice on the paper or are very nice on laboratory, but they cannot go into real life implementation. And in that sense, we studied the ROI, the energy return on energy investment of the technologies, to see which technologies are sensible and which technologies can be really implemented in the physical world. Because those technologies that have an energy return less than 1, so that they require more energy than the one that give, those technologies do not have a lot of sense in the economical basis. So it's very difficult for them to become options that will be used in the future. So yes, we are setting a lot of attention on these issues, but from a realistic point of view, which requires a very careful analysis of the numbers.
Thanks a lot, Margarita.
Yeah, thanks, Margarita. It was very clear.
Okay, I see Giovanni has his hand raised. Giovanni Sant'Angelo. Is this related to this point or is it related to something else? Giovanni? Okay, so we've got some other questions here. Okay, we'll go for a simpler question now. Will these tools be available in German and Italian as well? Maybe Ivan, do you have an answer for that?
Yes, I think the Crossroads 2 game will be developed in different languages, and I don't remember now, but I think it will be in French, English, German, Italy. It depends of the budget and the time that we have to develop the tools according to the project timeline.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay, maybe I'll see Giovanni. What was your point? Okay, I don't know, maybe you can type it if you have something you'd like to say, because I see your hand is raised. Okay, another question from Sonia. Sonia, would you like to pose your question yourself?
Thanks, Halet. Hi, everyone. I was wondering if Kati could explain a bit more about this pool of stakeholders. Is the private sector also part of this testing and this pool? And I mean, which type of it? Is there criteria who can join in this pool of stakeholders? It looks very crucial to choose which kind of people is in this testing. So I was wondering if you could explain a bit more. Thanks.
Thank you, Sonia. We have indeed some businesses or private actors, but actually not so many. So I think our pool is around like 170 members, and I think only 10 are at the moment private actors. So also to everyone who has contact to private actors who would be interested and willing to contribute, we would be really happy, because we clearly need some more members from that category. And so the criteria is, or how we choose was, I mean, what we try to achieve is that we have a balanced stakeholder pool as possible. So gender balance, balance in expertise when it comes to, so we divide it into expertise in economic aspects, climate change aspects, environmental aspects, social policy experts, or any other. So when choosing, we have this Excel sheet, and then we try to rank them in which areas they have their expertise, and also according to which regions they are coming from, or where they work, and which regions it's focused on. Yeah, as well as I said, gender balance, and then also what kind of type of organization they are. And essentially, I mean, how it kind of got together in the beginning was that every partner had already some people in mind, or some stakeholders in mind, that they wanted to propose for the stakeholder pool, and that's how they got in there. But yeah, so we do now regular assessments to see, okay, what kind of stakeholders are actually missing. And at the moment, we still have a European-centered focus of stakeholders, as well as a focus of stakeholders from the NGO and policymaker and think tank side. So yeah, our goal now is to increase, and also gender imbalance, slightly gender imbalance, is to, yeah, particularly look for stakeholders that are not in the board yet. And I think also educators, actually another stakeholder group that is currently lacking a bit.
Okay, thanks, Kati. We have another question about stakeholders from Eduardo. Eduardo, do you want to ask your question? Eduardo?
Yeah, thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's kind of related to Sonia's questions. I was just interested in getting to know whether you also cooperate with European standardization bodies, as those are kind of a link between policy with harmonized standards and also companies, as in the committees there's a lot of companies representation. And I'm a PhD researcher, so I'm currently researching the societal involvement of European societal stakeholders in the standardization, in European standardization. So I was wondering whether you had any prior contact with these kind of bodies, or if you see any fit from what you're doing and European standardization. I hope I made my point clear. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Don. Yeah, currently we don't have any involvement of these stakeholders. But I mean, as it sounds from you, it might be quite relevant or crucial. So I think we could look into how we can maybe get some people from these institutions to be part of our board pool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Eduardo, please get in touch with us and we can discuss it further. That would be excellent. Yeah. Okay, so there's there's some more sort of questions about the model itself. It is the decarbonization of transport. This is from C. Morel. C. Morel, do you want to ask a question yourself?
Hi, yes. I just wanted to know, when you're talking about the decarbonization of transport, are you talking about including in the locomotion project your renewable energy options in any case?
I don't know. Please, I couldn't hear the whole question. I had problems with the sound. Could you repeat the last part?
If are you going to include in the locomotion project any renewable energy options when you're talking about the decarbonization of transport?
Well, I'll answer if you don't mind. Yes, of course, we are going to take any other energy options. The paper that we just sent in the chat and Khaled talked about, that is a paper about the decarbonization and transportation. It's not based on locomotion model, but it's based on the previous model, which is the basis of the WILIAM model. No? And in this paper, we took into account several options to decarbonize transportation, mainly electric cars, hybrid cars, and gas cars as well, and some other options such as public transportation and substitution by light vehicles. And in locomotion, we are going to have a similar approach. So we are going to translate this module that we already have and increase a little bit the number of options, especially the public transportation and the train. And we want to have a model that enables us to see which policies are most sensible. For example, what happens if we use a lot of public transportation, or what happens if we try to reduce taxes for electric vehicles, or what happens if we use bikes in the cities or whatever. So these are the options that we will be able to make. And the transportation module is quite developed already, and it will be also quite developed in the new model.
Okay, great, thank you. We have also a couple of questions from Sholto. I hope I've said that correctly. Do you want to pose your questions?
Yeah, hi from Australia. Just looking in. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. One question I had was about how can I run the models on my laptop here? Do you have something like a Docker container that I can just download and run the models on quickly, on my machine? That was one question.
Yeah, does anyone have an answer? I think you could run it either on the site or I think, yeah, maybe, yeah.
Okay, To run the models on your laptop, we are working in the development of the standalone tool that is the model analyzer. This is a user-friendly interface that connect the models that are in a server side. You only need to download the package containing the user interface, and they connect to the models to run in your laptop and to obtain your results. This is developing in this way because the model are a lot time consuming, and you need to spend a lot of time to obtain your executions.
Well, but I want to say something, but maybe it's not clear. The WILIAM model is not done yet. So we are starting the project and the model is not done. If somebody wants to run previous models, which are of course not as powerful as the one that we have described here, you can talk to JITS and get access to the previous models, which run in Vensim, but there is a tool in Vensim for executing models. Instead, you don't have a license for this software, which is a private software.
Yeah, so the previous model is called Medias. This is the site. And yeah, the moment we're introducing what we're developing, of course. So it's not out yet. It will be out. And that's why for people who are interested, please follow us either on social media or sign up to the newsletter on our website, so you can keep abreast of these developments. Social media will give you more immediate news, or bookmark our website and come back quite regularly. But social media will keep you, abreast of the latest developments the fastest, and a newsletter will come. It's sent out once a year. So, but also if you sign up, we would also send you things like announcements of major developments and things like that. But these are all things in the pipeline, and there's been some initial results, and initial results are on the way in the coming months as well. So yeah, so do follow us to find out our groundbreaking results as and when they emerge. Okay, does anyone have any further questions or comments? Sholto, your hand is still up. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, my second question was around the methodology. So you've used energy return on energy investment, and there's another associated one coming out of the same school, which is the energy track summing algorithms. Did you consider using those? If not, why not?
Okay, I guess that's Margarita again who could answer.
Sorry, it must be my English, but I didn't understand which algorithms you talk.
The energy track summing algorithms.
I don't really know what you are talking about. Please, could you describe a little bit?
You're saying there's something called the energy track algorithms?
Energy trap.
Yeah, energy, E-M-E-R-G-Y.
Could you write it down in the chat, please?
I think he has written it. Wait,
yeah, I wrote it on the chat there.
Where did I see?
Published by Tenenbaum.
E-M-E-R-G-Y, Emergy, yeah?
Yeah.
Emergy network algorithms. Yeah, I personally haven't heard of that, but I'm not a scientist.
No, I haven't heard of that either. Maybe is it something that is called with other names? If you could describe a little bit what it is, please.
Yeah, I'll put some references in the Q&A.
But are you talking about electrical networks of energy or intermittency?
It's used by another term. It's called embodied energy, but Look, I'll just put some links in there. I don't want to take up your
You
time.
mean the embodied energy for trading among nations and so on, and the what they call the energy footprint of products?
Probably not so much energy footprint, but embodied energy is kind of similar. But the other term is called energy. It has its own.
Oh, energy. Okay. Energy. Oh, yeah, yes, that's right.
I'll put some.
Well, some of our colleagues have worked on this concept of the energy footprints, especially the people of BC3, to see what is the real energy consumption, for example, of rich nations, which normally is sent to other nations, no, through trade between nations. But since our model is global, we don't really need this footprint approach, because the trade between nations is going to be accounted in economical terms, and this will be related into energy consumption. So far, we are not using this approach of footprint. It is just the consumption inside the nations. But well, some of our colleagues are working on it, so we are kind of aware of it.
Yeah, and we do work on EROI as well. I've linked to an article in which we explain the energy return on investment approach that we're following. And I think Tommaso has something to say about this, right, Tommaso? Tommaso?
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
How are you? Yeah.
Fine, thanks. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's just energy was it came out from a contribution from H.T. Odium, who was an ecologist. And actually, I don't think we have anything related to energy in locomotion.
Okay.
So far as I know. As far as I know.
Okay, great. Thanks for the clarification, Tommaso. Yeah. Okay, is there anyone else who has a question or remark that they want to make? Because we've answered all the open questions as far as I can see. So does anyone have any final questions or remarks they want to make? Okay, it looks like, Sholto, is your hand up for another reason, or is that a legacy?
Legacy, sorry.
All right, mate. Okay, excellent. Well, we hope you found it informative and that you've enjoyed our presentation and discussion today. I'll leave the final word to our panelists. Any parting remarks you want to make before we call it a day? Maybe Robert, have you got anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, put me on the spot. No, I think that's wrapped up from me, really. I suppose, yeah, I think what's been mentioned about stakeholders, we're keen to get more stakeholders on board to get more perspectives about this, about if and how we can address these research questions, really. Thanks for joining us, really.
Okay, great. Thanks, Robert. I see Fons Janssen is very interested to learn more about this. Okay, please, yeah, Fons, get in touch with us and we can continue the conversation beyond this session. Kati or Ivan or Margarita, if you got anything final you'd like to say?
Well, I just wanted to say that I put in the chat 2 links to the previous works on the EROI methodology that we used previously. One of them is the dynamic EROI calculation, which is quite a novel approach.
Okay, thank you very much. Great. Okay. Well, on that note, I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to join us today. We're happy to have been able to introduce our work and the project we're working on. And yeah, and do follow us and keep sign up to our newsletter and follow us on social media, so that we can continue this relationship and conversation. And do tell your networks about our work. Thank you very much. And also to keep abreast of future webinars, we'll be holding what we call Locominars on numerous issues of interest, both to non-specialists and also to specialists. So these will be advertised also on our social media and website. So if you found this interesting, join us for future webinars. Thank you very much and have a good day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.